of ourselves, and then how to do it, like how to actually go about implementing that in our day-to-day lives. And I remember when I was your age, depending on audience members, but when I was in post-secondary, I would go to therapy for my own mental health. I had the usual suspects, right, that you run into all the time, like a lot of anxiety and some low mood and self-esteem. And I remember my therapist reminding me each week to be sure to fill up my own bucket. So that's what she would say. And I hear that oftentimes too, fill up your own bucket. And I got the gist of what she was saying. It makes sense. It's a great metaphor, but I was frustrated because I didn't know how. And I remember saying to her in an exasperated way, she probably wanted to fire me as a client because I wasn't like getting better. And I remember saying, how do I fill up my own bucket? Like, how do I do that? And then she said, well, that means being kind to yourself. And then I felt trapped because I was like, okay, fill up my own bucket is to be kind to myself. But then to be kind to myself, I fill up this bucket. And I just sort of felt like I still wasn't really quite sure how to do it. Okay. So there's my thoughts about why this is a good talk. And when I think about self-care, in all my confusion over the years, some of my first thoughts are more of a materialistic packaging of self-care. I think about websites that tout, top 10 things that we can get to help us practice self-care. And I can picture this list now that it would include things for helping us take a more relaxing bath, for instance. It would have bath bombs and body scrubs. But other things that maybe might be on that list are like silky sheets for your bed, or scented candles, or massage contraptions to relax your body, or nail polish even, or stuffies. And when I think about this list, I think, of course, I want these things. I'd like to just order them all from the internet because they sound really lovely. But I also have this deeper sense inside of me that they're probably not going to do this more healing trick that I'm after.
So some thoughts that come up for me when I personally consider self-care lists of things to do that are supposed to actually make me feel better are lists that might be titled Top 10 Things That I Can Do When I Need to Feel Restored. And for me, things on this list are things that I really want to do, but are really hard for me to do because I always feel like I just don't have the time. So things on my list might include going for a nature walk, particularly in the fall when it's so gorgeous outside. Things might also include, I would love to ride my stationary bike that I just bought a month ago that's placed in my living room that I've actually never touched yet. Also, other things might include spend some time with my friends, maybe do some baking, read an actual book that isn't a textbook, etc., etc. These things all sound amazing to me, and I want to do all of these things. And I can see how these things are likely to be a bit more healing than that prior list that Dr. Thake was just talking about. Sometimes taking a walk and spending some time with friends and reading for fun can really do the trick for me. In other words, they fill up my metaphorical bucket just enough to keep one foot in front of the other when I'm feeling a little bit burnt out. However, I can also see how some of these behaviors can sometimes be sort of band-aids for aspects of our lives that are not really serving us well.
So as you can see now, this is our confusion with Sasha and I, right? About what self-care is and how to go about doing it. But then I also wonder about, why do we need self-care in the first place? Why do we keep returning back to this place to, feel like we need to be restored and feel like we need our bucket to be filled up? When I picture someone who needs self-care, I might say to someone, you need self-care, I picture them that they have like hit a wall in their life, that they're tapped out, that they're burnt out, that they're on empty. Sorry for all the metaphors, but we have all these metaphors to kind of describe when someone is going to say to that person, you need to do some self-care. And then that self-care would be, okay, go carve out some time now for your bath and your nature walk and these other things that you're going to do to somehow kind of swoop in and fill them back up again and almost sort of save the day. Okay, but we wanted to approach this talk a little bit differently today. I didn't really want to provide, nor did Sasha want to provide this quick and kind of dirty list of things that we can do or buy to make ourselves feel better. But instead, we wanted to provide an opportunity for all of us to really consider what we need in our lives so that this idea of caring for self and filling up our buckets and loving ourselves, it's much more fully integrated in our day-to-day lives. And this includes more of a deep dive in exploring, why do we even need self-care in the first place? Why do we keep coming back to this place of needing it? What self-care really is and how to implement it. It's a big undertaking for a short talk, but we'll do our best and then are certainly available to answer questions later. So I'm going to get a little bit deep and heavy right off the bat. And let's think about some of the reasons why we need self-care in the first place. You can ask yourself, what is going on in my life that's leading me to need self-care? And this might help illustrate a little bit about more what I mean. As you heard, I'm a therapist and I meet with people with various mental health concerns, or I like to, as I'd like to say, just totally normal people like all of us. Anyways, and they'll come in and they'll say that their main desire for therapy and meeting with me is to find ways to better cope. And to handle stress in their lives. And they'll ask, that can you provide me some tips and strategies that I can use to help keep them afloat? And I think that that's a beautiful thing. Starting out with this idea, like this understanding that something's not going right here, and I need to find a way to make myself feel better, is a beautiful thing. But however, when I look at those people's lives on a deeper level, as I have more conversations with them, I can see that there's some things going on in their life that this surface self-care won't make better. For instance, I can see that they're in unhealthy relationships, or they just really truly dislike their job, or they have financial stress, they're perfectionistic, they get caught up in materialism, they hate their bodies, etc. So if I was to spend my time carving out like a place in their schedule where that they can add in some exercise and massage and a nice bath, I would be doing them some justice, right? It looks like that those are some of the things that they need to restore. But even though those acts of self-care are important, I don't think it would be probably the fix that they need on a deeper level to truly care for themselves. And here's some of the themes that I've put together that may bring people to a place of needing self-care. And for each of these themes, Sasha and I are going to provide you with an antidote, or maybe better said, a vaccine to help alleviate some of the things that are robbing from us, because I hear vaccines are a pretty popular topic these days. So let's go with that. You may or may not identify with one or more of these different themes, but one is this confusion about what's really important in our day to day. And it kind of has us running around the place where everything feels important, but then other things are neglected. This idea that happiness is around the corner. So we forget about our happiness right now because we sort of picture it being a little ways off at the next task, at the next goal that we need to reach. Another is how we respond to what the brain does is provide us with automatic negative thoughts. It does a lot of that during the day. And then how do we respond to that? And then finally, maybe going the wrong direction when it comes to trying to soothe the difficult emotions that we experience day to day. We might be trying to care for ourselves, but in a way, we might actually be making things worse for ourselves, depending on what we're turning to.
So, when we don't have a good sense of our priorities in life, we can end up spending a lot of time racing around and forgetting about those things in life that are truly important to us. We can get so busy on this task or that task. And then when we finally reach a point where we're burnt out or stressed, we realize that we've been neglecting ourselves and aspects of our lives that make us feel really good. So for me, I can get pretty obsessed with my work. I really do feel fortunate that I'm really passionate about studying psychology, so I tend to fill up all of my time with work. I was also a bit older than my peers when I started university, so I've always treated school like a full-time job. And I quickly learned that the more time, effort, and enthusiasm that I put into school, the more really valuable opportunities that would actually present themselves to me. I've also never really felt like the typical student because no one I spoke to at school really seemed to work the way that I did. For example, since my first year in university, I work all day. I work pretty late into the night, pretty into the early mornings as well. I often work on weekends, I work on holidays, and I'm happily willing to lose sleep for work because I never feel like there's enough hours in the day to accomplish everything that I need to do. So here I am into my sixth year of university, and although I feel extremely accomplished and I love my work, at times I struggle to feel satisfied with my work life balance. It actually feels easier to throw myself 100% into my work because I'm really good at it. But once in a while, admittedly, sometimes when I'm scrolling on Instagram and I'm looking at, Instagram stories of my friends that are not in school, I have this feeling that creeps up on me that I'm missing out on things that are really important in life, like investing quality time with friends, calling my family, making healthy meals or working out, sleeping for more than 5 hours, brushing my dog's teeth rather than giving her the treat that's supposed to do it for me. All these things seem super important. All these things seem less important because I always have some deadline that's coming up. But I tend to forget that no matter what, I always have some type of deadline coming up. But when I actually make time to do these things, I think to myself that I really can make time for these things if I just take a little moment in my day to reflect on how important they actually are for my well being and how happy I feel when I actually do them.
I can really relate, to what Sash has said there. To get to where I am in my life, I had to say yes to a lot of things. And saying yes has brought me, a ton of opportunities and accomplishments. However, saying yes to things and finding myself grinding and grinding away day to day on this sort of endless list of tasks wasn't bringing me the kind of joy that I was hoping to be having for my short life. I just had this sense of urgency that everything was important and nothing could be dropped. And I was a little bit like a chicken with its head cut off in a way, going in every direction, but no direction at all. And it turns out later in life, I can see that a lot of that racing around that felt so very important in those moments and urgent was actually not as important or essential after all to my path. And it's sad because I spent a lot of years feeling really overwhelmed and overloaded and missing out on opportunities for joy. And not having a strong sense of our priorities, or in other words, what's important or meaningful to us, can lead us to experience lower well being. We can oftentimes feel overwhelmed or lost. And without clear priorities, it's also really difficult to manage our time wisely. We might feel like we're winning okay in some areas, but then also failing in others.
So, when we're clear on our priorities, we may find it much easier to say yes and no to tasks and set boundaries. And we can make better and quicker decisions that guide our life choices. Our priorities are areas of our lives that are meaningful and important to us. They're usually activities, practices, or relationships that we want to put some genuine effort and time into. Priorities imply that a hierarchy can be followed for different areas of your life and or work. Rather than feeling like everything is important, priorities help you to choose what you need to focus on first. When I finally figured out my top priorities, it helped me realize that I don't have to do everything. Now, when I want to tell someone no, it's much easier to say that isn't one of my priorities right now. I don't actually feel guilty for saying no anymore, and it doesn't feel like I'm making excuses just to get out of something.
Yeah, when it comes to this vaccine of figuring out your priorities, it unfortunately, well, fortunately, but it did require that I made a really big change not that long ago. I would always talk the talk that family life was my absolute most important thing. However, I wasn't walking the walk. I would find myself, despite stating my priority was family life, staying late at work, working on weekends, saying yes to everything, probably then really truly being present with my family. And this is a bit, shameful for shame. I feel some shame, to kind of admit that. But it's good that I could see that the longer term repercussions of not having my priorities straight or being confused about my priorities was having a pretty big impact on me. I wasn't happy. I felt disconnected from things that were important to me. I felt stressed a lot of the time. I was overwhelmed and I felt guilty because some of the things that should have been higher up on my priorities weren't day to day. So I was forced to make a big change in my life and it took some overhauling, but I stopped saying yes to every research contract and every teaching opportunity. I had to put in firm boundaries about leaving at 4 p.m. every day. And all of a sudden, when my life began to align with my values, it was so much easier to say no to things because it just wasn't working. It didn't make sense. It wasn't as important as some of those other things that were higher up on the hierarchy. Um, but I do feel better now that things are more aligned.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that as well, more on a student level. When I was an undergraduate, I would jump on every single volunteer work or research opportunity that was offered to me. And in the second to last year of my undergrad program, I got accepted into a pretty competitive 6 month volunteer research program at CHIO. And I was super proud of that. Everyone at the hospital told me what an amazing opportunity it was and how lucky I was to finally be in the program. But then I started, and let me tell you, I hated it. The work was really boring and it didn't feel meaningful at all. I was basically walking around the emergency room and asking parents if they would be interested in having their kids participate in research. And most of the time they said no, and that's about it. Second of all, it was in January. My shift was on the weekend. It was super early in the morning. And normally all that would be okay, but I couldn't help but feel every shift that my time could be better spent somewhere else. So after 2 months, I quit. For the first time, I actually quit something and it felt really good. It was really hard to make that decision because everyone that I worked with at the hospital was amazing, like really amazing people to work with. But leaving was so worth it because it was the start where I realized that my time should be spent on things that I actually enjoy doing and find meaningful, or else it's just not worth my time. Ultimately, priorities help you set and stick to boundaries. As you've probably experienced, trying to do everything on your to do list can spread you rather thin and can lead to some eventual burnout.
So, here are some examples of priorities that you could or might already have, but they could be sort of in the wrong order right now. The list is really endless, I suppose, of things that could be a priority, up from, major things that you're trying to pursue in your life to small day-to-day things. But when you think about priorities, try to keep in mind what is really truly meaningful and important to you at the end of the day. And looking at this list, think about what feels right. I can see my top priorities right away, and I would say that a long time ago I wouldn't have been able to order these as easily. Family comes up right away, health and self-care, then work, then friendships. It feels maybe not, my friends probably don't want to hear that that is my order, but it helps me keep things in my head every day. And I'm really disciplined now when it comes about these priorities. Everything else on that list can wait. But I see myself packing my lunch every day and I go for walks and I exercise as part of my self-care and health. I text my friends, I call my family, I stay present at work when I'm there and I leave work when I'm done. And all of this has really, having these in mind has really keeps me focused day to day. So what if you're not sure what your priorities are? Well, first things first, let's kind of get a clearer vision of your life. And here's a test that I like to use. It's called the end of the day test, created by Jenny Thake, although maybe some other mind has come up with this first. But as you might notice, at the end of the day, our thoughts come to find us. That's when our brain likes to do a lot of work when it's supposed to be like shutting up and going to bed. And we can lay awake in bed at night thinking about the things that were dreading doing tomorrow or the things that we were sick of doing that day. We also lay awake and think about the things that we wished we had have done, we wished we had have gotten done. And finally, we spend some time at night making promises to ourselves about the things that are really important to us, but we're going to do them the next day. However, we often find ourselves remaking those promises many nights, for years sometimes. We can often feel torn, disappointed, guilty at the end of the day. And this can tell us that our days and our life is not potentially aligning with our values or things that we should be prioritizing. When our life actually does align with our values, we usually feel something pretty different at the end of the day. I read a book once and maybe it's like 5 things you must learn before you die. I think that that was it. But they described this phenomena of being a good tired, meaning that the person who is a good tired has put effort and time into those things that made sense to them. So that at the end of the day, those voices about dread and feeling sick of things and wishing that they had have done things differently is sort of quieter because they're a good tired. It all kind of lined up. And to achieve a good tired in our life, we may have to make some small adjustments and rearranging, or we may need to make some kind of large scale overhaul. I think Sasha's going to talk about the deathbed test, which is a little bit more of a morbid version of this.
So I'm going to take us through a really intense example of something called the deathbed test. So here we go. Take the time to really imagine being on your deathbed. Make it as real as possible. Imagine the feel of the stiff sheets, the hospital smell, the sound of your family nervously sniffing and swallowing, crying, surrounding you. Imagine the feel of your partner's hand as they hold yours to comfort you. Imagine the click and beep of ventilators and hospital equipment. Imagine the weakness and frailty of old age consuming your body, your strength gone, each breath a mountain climb. Can you imagine it? Can you see the memories running through your mind? Can you feel that twinge of regret? The deathbed test takes us to a scene where we are faced with a final moment of clarity and reflection. We imagine being on our deathbed, of course, with the benefit of hindsight, and we determine what was a good use of our life and what wasn't. As we come back to the present, we ask ourselves a simple question to guide a choice. When I'm looking back at my life from my deathbed, which one of these options will I regret not doing the most? So this test, the deathbed test, can sort of help us decide which aspects of our lives are really valuable to us and which aspects of our lives should be prioritized here and now.
So that's some of what we had to say on a more introductory level on at the anti-self-care theme of having confusion about our priorities. And then a bit of a vaccine, such as reflecting on what we're missing day to day, or really going back to the end of our life and looking back at what we wish we could have done differently, or tuning into that feeling of regret to help us figure out what needs to come first, second, third, and fourth. Another anti self care theme that I see in people's life is this belief that happiness is just around the corner. As human beings, with our frontal lobe that is so advanced, we have this great ability, unlike in other animals, to imagine in great detail and the emotions that could come along with it, what our future will look like. And this great ability, unfortunately, can get us caught up in something called the happiness trap. This is where we predict that we're going to reach happiness in the future once we have or have done certain things. The problem with the happiness trap is that it can lead us to refrain from putting great effort into our self care now because we're waiting for this beautiful future place that we'll get to later. And as a result, I've fallen for this, and I've spent a lot of time wishing away my life with hopes of a happy future. I spent a lot of years at university, 14 years to be exact, and I wished away a lot of that time. It's embarrassing to say, but I thought, oh gosh, this is embarrassing, but I thought that when I finished my doctorate, I would have this posh job. And then when I would walk into a room, people would introduce me as Dr. Thake and really respect me. And I'd imagine that because of my new, imaginary pay that was going to be so high, that I would have this fancy condo downtown and that my fancy friends would come over on weekends and we'd have martinis on the balcony. And I could really, my frontal lobe did such a great job of creating this thing that I could have when I was done my PhD. It turns out happiness is not a destination or a thing. And I know you know that, but we fall for it constantly. What happened in actuality was that I didn't like the job I was doing at the time. In fact, I really hated it. I bought a condo that I could barely afford. I had great friends, but I wouldn't particularly say we were overly fancy. And I don't think I ever had one fancy party there. The point is, when we focus on happiness and this happiness that we can have in our future, we are neglecting opportunities for experiencing happiness now. So then what do we do about it? Well, if we stop striving for happiness that's in the future, we will need to pay attention then to the opportunities for happiness in the here and now, because that's really it. Like these little feelings of a shower feeling nice and a cream that smells good, like these are the little blips of what feels good in our life that we have. Some great thing might happen in the future, but it will pass too. So we kind of have to grab onto these little things because that's it. To do this, we have to pay more attention to what feels good to us and see if we can pull them closer on a day-to-day basis, or at least really pay attention when those things are happening. And this can at times take some curiosity about our life, some bravery to make some different choices and introduce some new things, and some willingness to fail. We can find out a lot about ourselves and what feels good by asking ourselves during the day, do I like this? To all sorts of different things that are happening during the day. Do I like this? Does this feel good to me? And if so, great. And if not, is there some way that we can change this for the better? So in interest of keeping on track with embarrassing life anecdotes, here's one for you. I really never have liked showering. I will like avoid. And when I look at why this is the case, this terrible habit, it's because when I was young, my dad, we were on a well and a septic system, and he was so water conscious and worried about us like using up the water or whatever. He put timers on when we were in the shower, and we had to get out after a very short period of time. And this is super stressful for me as a teenager with acne and hair that needed to be washed and whatever. And it literally still makes me feel anxious to this day, to like sometimes make myself cook it in the shower. Oh gosh, this is going terrible. Anyways, so I was realized that I was stuck in this idea, just this belief that shower equals anxiety. But when I began to pay attention to this idea of, do I like this, right? When I was in the shower, do I like this? And I was like, meh, not really. But then I made some adjustments to make it feel better. And now I really like sitting down in the shower. I know I'm a total weirdo, but it's just something that actually feels good. And now I have it available to me every day, this little blip of an opportunity that feels good. It may not be a fancy martini in this future world, but it's real. I also found myself, when I asked, do I like this? Does this make me feel good? That I actually like cooking from cookbooks rather than kind of looking at things on my phone. That I enjoy doing face masks. That I like watching scary movies, but by myself, not with other people who like can't handle it. I like going for long walks and listening to podcasts. And I like staring at other people's gardens and kind of judging them or something. So, in other words, when I ask myself day to day what makes me feel good, I learned a lot about myself and about those things that I need to be keeping doing in order to have that. So that's that kind of first example that I gave you for a vaccine here, is to ask yourself different times during the day, does this feel good to me? For the next one, the photo essay journal. When I meet with clients who are struggling to figure out what feels good to them in their lives and what's restorative, I send them on a photo essay, and I make them take pictures of anything for the next week or two until we see each other next that piques their curiosity or makes them feel pleasant or makes them laugh. And they'll come back with pictures of all sorts of things, of flowers and cozy socks and posters for a band they want to see, or some kind of online ad for goat yoga. I've seen it all. And we have a really good talk about, hey, these are the things that you can access in the here and now that are available to you, that you don't need to transport to the future to go get. A third way of looking at happiness is around the corner. To kind of move away from that is, you can listen to that daydreamy voice inside of you. If you're human, you're going to have thoughts during the day of like, oh wow, I'd really like to try that, or that looks pretty cool, I wonder if I'd like it. And sometimes these things seem like out of character to us or inconsistent with who we are, so we just sort of squash them. We're like, forget it, I can't do that, it's not going to work out. I've never had a creative bone in my body. And one night I was laying awake and I had that kind of thought. I sort of started to imagine myself being able to sew my own clothes. Like, okay, bear with me. And I could see myself, feeling really confident and happy doing it. And there was a big part of me that was wanting to shut that down. Like, I have no time for that. I'm doing a PhD research, barely have time for other things. But I did. I Googled it the next day. I Googled like sewing for beginners. And guess what? I can't sew a Met Gala dress, that's for sure, but I can certainly make a mean tablecloth. And it feels really good. It took some bravery and being humble and willingness to fight for something that was new. But here I am, and I have this now in our life. And research has actually found that this belief that we know our true self and understand what feels good is linked to more positive emotions and having a real sense of more meaning in our life.
Sometimes there are things we know are good for us, but we may not actually do them because we believe they're going to rob us of the little bit of energy and time that we feel like we have left. Research has found that there are some activities we can do that will provide us with energy and positive emotions. More than that, these activities sort of shut off that really annoying part of the brain that keeps us worrying and keeps us focusing on ourselves. This phenomena is called psychological flow. In positive psychology, a flow state is known as being in the zone. Basically, it's giving complete focus to an activity that challenges you, but is still intrinsically rewarding and enjoyable. When experiencing flow, people report having feelings of serenity and being so focused on the present that they even lose track of time passing by. Flow happens when we're so involved in an activity that nothing else seems to matter. Some people might experience flow while engaging in sports, while others when engaging in activities such as painting or drawing or writing, cooking, or even while playing a game of chess. What seems to be the key is the activity must be something that you're really passionate about. Now, lots of flow research has actually been done on athletes, looking at associations between flow and peak performance. It's been found that when athletes are performing at their best, there's also an experience of flow, positive emotions, and happiness. Researchers have also found that flow can enhance performance in a wide variety of areas, including teaching, learning, and artistic creativity. So you might be wondering, how does it actually feel to experience flow? If you've ever felt completely immersed in an activity, you might just have felt it. Imagine for a moment that you're running for a race. Your attention is focused on the movements of your body, the power of your muscles, the force of your lungs, and the feel of the street beneath your feet. You're living in the moment, completely absorbed in the present activity. Time seems to fall away, your whole body is involved, and you're using your skills to the maximum. Now, if you're not so much into running like me, think of a time when you were focused on an activity that you liked. After a few minutes, you get into the zone, and what happens once you do? Maybe you were writing a story or immersed in your favorite video game. Did you lose track of time? Did your writing come more easily to you? Were you able to reach higher levels in the game more easily and faster? Have you ever done a job and thought, I do this even if they didn't pay me? That's a good one.
Mhm.
Maybe the satisfaction from doing the work motivated you to continue. So we really need to try and make time in our lives for these meaningful activities because they give us energy and excitement and help us to feel motivated and more satisfied with our lives.
So, another anti self care theme we've discovered is getting pulled in by and caught up and captured by automatic negative thoughts that we can have during the day, or that we do have and will have during the day.
Above all else, I don't think there's anything else in our lives that can wear us down more than our thoughts.
Yeah.
Now, I could take a drone, of course, on super duper silent and in invisible mode, and follow each and every one of you around all day. I would likely see you do all sorts of things, like being in your car or taking the bus, grabbing a bite to eat, cleaning your place, texting a friend, watching videos, etc. By watching all of this, I would likely conclude that you didn't confront any type of objective stressor during the day, and thus, you're probably likely feeling consistently good. However, we know that our lives don't really work that way. We think all day, and this greatly impacts how we feel. We often are not even thinking about what we're actually doing in that present moment. Rather, our brains go in all kinds of directions and typically get stuck in really stressful thoughts and moments. Now, just to be clear, stress does not actually exist in the world. We feel stressed because we have stressful thoughts. I can make any moment in my life distressing by getting caught up in these stressful thoughts. So, for instance, I can make standing in a line more stressful by thinking, oh man, this is so long. What am I doing here? What's wrong with these other people? Why are they taking so long? I have so many things to do. I'm never going to get my work done. So much for my plans of watching Black Mirror tonight. Now, it's really, really important to know that our brain is an automatic thought generator, and it tends to prefer to think about things that are stressful. And when it does, we tend to get caught up in them, and it makes our body feel really stressed as well. And when our bodies feel stressed, we begin to believe that something bad is happening. But again, it's just all in our minds. Research has found that mindlessness or getting caught up in our thoughts is associated with symptoms of anxiety and low mood and other types of mental health concerns.
So, what do we do? Our brain, as Sasha mentioned, is this automatic thought generating machine. We really tend not to invite thoughts into our brain, they just show up. And human nature, for a lot of probably survival reasons, there's many theories about this, but we have more negative thoughts day to day than we do positive automatic thoughts. So we can't stop ourselves from having these thoughts. They're going to come. But what we can do is we can begin to find a way to interrupt how long we spend in stressful thoughts, which can lead us to feel less suffering in our lives. And in a roundabout way, is a way that we're actually caring about ourselves over and over again during the day. And this involves making an effort to continually catch yourself just thinking. I probably have to catch myself maybe 100 times during the day to say, "Whew, I'm thinking." That's really it. And then sometimes if I'm feeling distressed, I'll ask myself, well, what am I thinking? And it doesn't take me long to figure out, well, that's why I'm distressed. It's because of the thoughts that I'm having at the time. You can turn to yourself when you realize you're thinking and you look at the content of what those thoughts are. Ask yourself, are these thoughts that I'm having right now helpful? Are they healthy? Are they even true? And oftentimes, the answer to all three is no. Then, now that we've noticed that we're thinking and that we're noticing that thinking is not helpful, we have to think about something else. And that involves refocusing and recentering on what is actually happening in your life at this moment. So during this talk, your mind probably wandered to stressful thoughts about later in the day, or things you could have done or should have done, or things you wish you do that are pulling you away from what's happening right now. So if you're not feeling so good, you can kind of say to yourself, well, what am I thinking about right now? And is this overly helpful to me that I'm getting caught there? And then refocus. And we have to do this a billion times to our lifetime, more than a billion times if we want to be successful, because the mind will automatically generate more thoughts. right? But the point is to not get stuck in that stressful thought for so long, not have that wear and tear on the body, not get stuck in that stressful story. Because, say, for instance, as Sasha mentioned, standing in line, right? If we can catch ourselves standing there feeling stressed and having these negative thoughts, like what's wrong with these people and whatever, and we ask ourselves, okay, is this any help right now? Well, it's not. It's not going to make the line go faster. Okay, so let's tune in to something that's actually happening right now. What does my sweater feel like when it's touching the edge of my wrist? What do the smells feel like in the room? What does it feel like to have the weight on both feet? Just kind of coming right back again until we get swooped away. Now, a final anti-self-care theme and the relevant vaccine is to look at how we turn to quick fixes to soothe us when we experience difficult emotions, which can prolong suffering and make it harder to really truly care for ourselves.
When we're stressed out, we often turn to things like substances, food, sleep, and isolation to try and distract and take our minds off of how we're actually feeling. We do these things not because we're stupid or lazy, but because they actually work. Unfortunately, using these things in an unhealthy way usually end up as part of the stress in the first place. For example, we're stressed and we need to unwind. So we go out with friends, we might overeat, overdrink, and think for a while, woohoo, I'm free, finally relax. But then the next day rolls around, we might feel some shame, guilt, potentially even some embarrassment for the things we did the previous day. Then later that next day, we're back to the same life that we were escaping from in the first place. And so back to the drawing board. This cycle can become a habit. We can actually end up doing this for years and years. I myself have created some unhealthy ways to combat stress in my teens and early 20s that I've still hung on to today. So, for example, unfortunately, I've been a smoker for many years, but last year I quit. And then in March this year, the week we started the COVID lockdown, I was really overwhelmed with everything and started smoking again. It really helped me control the stress I was feeling at the time, but after a few months, the smoking was becoming really excessive. So it went from smoking to relieve stress to stressing about how much I was smoking and constantly thinking about how I could stop smoking and how hard it would be when I eventually had to get there. So I finally quit again about a month ago, but it was extremely tough and difficult. I've had to relearn how to deal with all the COVID related stress in a different way, on top of the stress of quitting smoking. Now, whenever I feel the stress coming on, I take my dog out for a really nice long walk because I really miss being outside all the time. It was difficult to find a healthier way to deal with the negative emotions I was feeling and the stress, but putting in that effort has made it so worth it because I feel so much more control over my life. And plus, my dog is ridiculously happy about the newfound multiple walks throughout the day. So, win win.
Yeah. Now, when experiencing difficult emotions, instead of turning to a quick fix, we can begin to ask ourselves, what do I really need in this moment? This is a hard question because we get so caught up in quick fixes and we're not really good at even knowing what emotion we're experiencing sometimes and then how to even soothe that emotion. I got in a habit once of, once, but for years, of ordering a pizza, like a full medium pizza, and eating the whole thing. So I was overeating, and this was my reward each time that I would do an evening lecture. So I was doing this once a week. And I mean, for a really long time, it was such like this place of oblivion that felt really good for me. I loved the smell of the pizza, like the taste, and I just kind of enter pizza land and I'd feel better. But each time this happened, I did the quick fix, but then really quickly, I would feel so full, obviously, that I couldn't really move. And then I'd be feeling this guilt and shame. And then I'd feel like I needed to make up for it. And in the end, this caused more stress for my life than actually soothed me. But why did I need soothing? And what kind of soothing did I need on those nights that I would come back from teaching? And I needed to work with a therapist for that. And I found out that I yeah, the type of soothing that I was turning to wasn't meeting my underlying need. And she asked me that same question that I'm asking you is, what do you really need at that moment? And it took us a while and me a while to kind of figure that out. And I realized that I wanted to find a way to cocoon myself, that I was feeling stressed at the same time as exhausted and self-conscious from lecturing in front of people. So I wanted to feel safe and like covered around a cocoon. And I didn't want to have to think. So I needed to kind of find elements to soothe what that was. So we experimented in ways to meet my need. And I found out that I could get there, that I needed to have a sit down shower first when I got home. Oh gosh, I put on my PJs, like the flannelly kind, that I'd make kind of a nest on my couch and like drag my duvet into the room. I'd make a snack and pull over my coffee table, and I'd find a favorite show, like 48 Hours Mystery, that was absorbing enough to shut off my mind. And that I would soothe myself that way. And so here I was meeting my actual needs. My things were that I was exhausted and I was stressed and I was feeling self-conscious and in my mind. And doing those things were actually truly meeting my need. You know, there are many ways to face and then soothe painful emotions. We provided on this slide, a few different emotions that we can experience, and then some examples of ways that maybe might truly soothe that thing so that we're not having to like re-stress ourselves from engaging in something that's unhealthy. We can listen to once in a while to what we need rather than covering it up. And interestingly enough, research has found that the act of accurately labeling the specific emotion or emotions we are experiencing when we're distressed. So for me, I had to put the label on, I'm exhausted, I'm self-conscious, that it seems to help us um, understand what we're really feeling in order to help us actually find what we need to soothe that. So research has found it, just figure out even the word of what it is that's happening to you in that moment, that emotional word, what you're feeling can help you figure out how you need to soothe yourself. Here's some final thoughts. At the beginning of this talk, Sasha and I pointed out ways that societal messaging makes self-care feel like it's easy and it's right at your fingertips. But when we truly consider what might actually help us feel better and how to do it, it's not so easy. Sasha and I figured out a lot about mental health by pulling ourselves out of our own darker times in our lives and through reading articles from researchers. But some of my greatest personal insights were gained, as I mentioned, in my moments of suffering through meeting with a therapist. They helped me figure out my priorities, what makes me happy, how to, thank God my therapist told me about how to actually soothe an emotion I was feeling. And so many of us are struggling for so long, and we can't understand why we're feeling the way we are, why we're behaving the way we are. And having this external, non judgmental, and unbiased perspective can help shed light on things that we cannot see that might help us feel better. And this is not a plug for myself as a therapist at all, I promise you. It's just a real observation from what I've found to be helpful in my own life and what I've seen from research as this fellow struggling human being that I am.
I believe I can talk for Dr. Thake and myself today that it was an honor to talk to you about ways that you can weave self-care into your daily lives so that it feels more restorative. So this talk provided us with an opportunity to reflect on our own lives and to help us continue to move towards what can help us feel a little bit better. We hope that this talk had a somewhat similar impact on you. These things might have been things that you already know deep down, but sometimes it really helps to hear these things out loud. Finally, we would like to thank Algonquin Student Services for having us here. It says a lot about your institution, shows that you guys care about your well-being and are willing to take steps to help you find it. Now we're available for any questions. If you would prefer to ask questions more privately, you're all welcome to email Dr. Thake at jennifer@junipercounseling.ca. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sasha and Dr. Thake. That presentation was incredible. This is my third time hearing Dr. Thake speak, and every time it's so helpful. And even just seeing some of the comments come in, I think everyone's feeling the same thing. And just so everyone knows, this session is being recorded. There's questions coming in now about that. So it's being recorded. It will be added to the AC Hub Always Connected website, and it will be there for 1 month. So until November 7th, and then after that, it'll be taken down. So if I don't see any questions coming in, and it doesn't look like anyone has their hand up. So I would just like to quickly mention that our next Mental Illness Awareness Week event is on Friday, October 9th, and it's from 2 to 3 p.m. It's called Sisters in Spirit, and the virtual event is open to all students and employees. And through traditional Indigenous teachings and a healing circle, the Algonquin College community will learn about the emotional impact of missing and murdered Indigenous women on communities and how we can help end gendered violence. So more details can be found online, and Leanne will be adding the link to the chat right now. Okay, and looks like there's still no more questions. So thank you so much, Sasha, and thank you, Dr. Thake, for joining us today.
You're very welcome. I'm happy to be here, and it's always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll see you guys in the future, but enjoy the now. Okay, bye.
Bye.